Hello, we received numerous requests over the years to revisit some of my earlier modification works from the 80s. Going through all my notes, I have kind of distilled a best of to create our hand-wired Helios amplifier. This amp covers anything in the British territory from the 60s to the mid-80s. Many people ask, should I get the 50 or 100 watt Helios and what's the difference between them? The 100 watt will give you more headroom, tighter bass, faster attack and really move a lot of air that hits you hard in the chest. The 50 watt is still plenty loud, but a touch sweeter and maybe not as tight in the bass response. If in doubt, get the 100 watt, as you can always use the 30 watt mode. So briefly, we're going to go real quick over the front panel of the Helios amplifier. We're going to start out with the two input jacks. The bottom one is the plexi input. This is more like vintagey, crunchier sounds, and then the hot input adds more gain and suitable for more like hot rodded kind of gainier sounds. Those two input jacks cannot be foot switched via an A/B box. Now we're moving on to the next feature, which is the bright switch. That is kind of the bright switch for the clean channel. This is the clean volume 1, it's the clean channel volume, and this is the bright switch for the clean channel. So it has 3 positions. We're going to go over that a little bit later in more detail. Then moving on to this switch, that's the channel switching switch. If you don't have a foot switch plugged in, this will switch you, from between the two channels. Over there is the clean channel, over here is the dirty channel. If you plug in a foot switch, it will be overridden, and then this switch will not do anything, then the foot switch will be the master. Moving on to the next control, that's the gain. It's called gain 2. That's the dirty channel or overdrive channel, gain control. Then moving on to the next switch over here, this is the bright switch that is kind of connected with the gain for the dirty channel. Also 3-position bright switch. Next control is the master volume for the dirty channel, volume 2. So this sets the kind of how loud you want to play. Next control would be the 70-80 switch. That kind of switches basically like the character of the amplifier, how much gain and how it responds. Moving on to the next 3 controls, treble, mid, bass, which is basically the EQ for the dirty channel. In conjunction with this EQ here, we have a switch called EQ. To the left, the EQ is engaged, and to the right, the EQ is disengaged, so then the controls will not function. Moving on to the last control, which is called presence. This is the master presence for the overall amplifier, so basically it affects the channel 1, the clean channel, and the overdrive channel. So when we are, for example, now in the clean channel, in channel 1, we have the control of the volume, bright switch, and the presence control. That's all that works on the clean channel. And then the dirty channel, for example, we would have anything from here, the gain, the volume, the treble, the mid, the bass, the presence, and all those switches over here. The bright switch, the 70s, 80s, and the EQ switch. And the switch in between those two channels, channel 1 and channel 2, is the channel switcher, like we explained earlier, which can be overridden by a foot switch. So we're going to start off with the clean channel. Going into the plexi input, the low gain input, the volume control of the clean channel is set around 1 o'clock at the moment, the presence control at 12 o'clock, and then we're going to play with the bright switch. Right now it's set at neutral. We're going to play a little bit of that, then we're going to go B1. B1 will add a little bit more of the high-end sparkle, and then B2 will add the high-end sparkle and some mid-range, which will really bring out the pick attack of the guitar. So let's listen to neutral. And then B1. And then B2. So now we're going to go over to the dirty channel. I'm going to switch over to the channel 2. The gain we're going to set up is more like a clean channel, so we can have basically 2 clean channels. We showed you earlier the clean channel of channel 1. Now we set up the channel 2 as a clean channel, so we'll run the gain around 9 o'clock. The bright switch is around B1, which adds a little bit of the shimmer, and the volume is set around 2 o'clock, treble around 1, mid around 12 or 1 o'clock, and then bass almost 3 o'clock, and the presence is still at 12 o'clock. So let's listen to this. So now we're going to kick up the gain on the dirty channel around 2 o'clock. We're still in the low gain plexi input. The bright switch, we're going to start at neutral. I'm going to go through all 3 settings in a minute, B1 and B2. Volumes around 12 o'clock, treble and mid around 1 o'clock, and bass around 11, presence 12 o'clock. EQ is on and we are still in the 70s mode. That should give you a good plexi sound. So that was in neutral. Now B1 should kick in a little bit more high end, a little bit more sparkle. And then B2, which adds quite a bit more mid-range, aggression and high end. So to go real briefly over the interaction of the bright switch and the EQ. Normally on the normal setting in the bright switch, I would run the mid and the trap a little bit higher and the bass a little bit lower. In B1 similar. In B2 for sure I would bring down the mid and the treble a little bit and bring up the bass. That kind of like balances it somewhat out and gives you a nice overall sound. Okay, so now we're gonna go from the 70s to the 80s mode. The 80s mode I really recommend for like late night jams at home and lower volume settings because it brings in a little more compression and gain, which makes up for the lack of power distortion at lower volumes. In the 80s mode, there's a slight volume drop, so we're gonna remedy this with just bringing the volume up a tad to balance that out. We're still in the plexi, low gain input. Gain is still at around 2, 3 o'clock. And the EQ pretty much flat, 12 o'clock, everything, including the presence. EQ is on. And we're gonna start with the bright switch in neutral. And then we're gonna play some, and then we're gonna go to the B2, which like before brings up the more aggressive mids and high end. So now we're gonna switch to B2, which adds a little bit more mid-range aggression and high end. So the last switch we're going to explain here on the front panel is the EQ switch. So everything you heard so far in channel 2 had the 3-band EQ engaged. Now we're soon going to switch the EQ switch to the right. This disengages the treble, mid and bass control. And this gives you a more pure, more raw kind of tone. Less is more, and this gives you the real goes to 11 sound. So now we're going to step it up quite a bit. We're going to add a gain stage through plugging into the hot input, and this will add more gain to the clean channel and the dirty channel. And we're going to start it with the clean channel. We have it set right now at 11 o'clock. B1 is on, and the presence at 12 o'clock. Let's hear what that sounds like. So now we're going to switch over to channel 2, and we're still in the hot input. We run the gain almost 3 o'clock, volume around 12:30, treble, mid bass, and presence, everything is at 12 o'clock. And we're in the 70s mode, B2 in EQ is on. Let's check this out. So starting with the same setting, we're kicking in the 80s mode for extra gain, compensating a bit with the volume control. Here we go. So now we're on the back panel, and I'll start with the feature of the 100 watt, 30 watt mode. So far everything was played in the JMP 100 watt mode, and let's hear that. So now we're going to go from the JMP 100 watt mode to the JTM 30 watt mode. This provides you with a more old school, spongier, bluesier breakup, and also less power. Go real quick back to the 100 watt mode. Okay, so now moving over to the bottom control and the punch switch. Everything so far in the sound samples was done with the bottom at 12 o'clock and the punch switch on. The bottom control basically controls the feedback, and the more you turn it up, the more low end you get. And this works really well at low volumes, but at higher volumes you might want to turn it to halfway or even lower to tighten up the sound. The punch switch will engage a more like in-your-face kind of sound. On the way down, it's a little bit more subdued. So now we're moving on to the effects loop, which basically is those four controls. It's the switch, the two jacks, and the return volume. The switch is overridden by the foot switch if it's plugged in. If it's not plugged in, this one will be the on-off switch. The return and descend obviously goes to the effects, and you want to set the return volume so when you switch it in and out, it will match the level with it in and out. So you have unity level with the effects or with it out. So like that's where you adjust the level. So the very cool feature about this effects loop is if you don't plug in any effects here, you can switch it on via your foot switch, and the return volume becomes your boost level. Here's the foot switch jack that receives the 2-button foot switch, which one of the buttons controls the channel switching and the other one the effects loop. Coming now to the speaker outputs. We choose the design of like having separate speaker jacks for each impedance and getting rid of the impedance switch, just like we did in our earlier Shivas and the caveman models. This is a more pure signal pass, one less switch in the signal, and this really brings out the harmonics of the transformer and translates better to the cabinet. We would have the 16 ohm cap go into the 16 ohm output. If you have two 16 ohm caps, you would run them into the two 8 ohm outputs. If you have only one 8 ohm cap, you would go into one of the 8 ohm jacks. If you have two 8 ohm cabinets, you would go them into the 4 ohm jacks. And if you have a single 4 ohm cabinet, you would go into 4 ohm cabinet output. As you can hear, there's a tremendous amount of sonic versatility in the Helios. Be sure to use your own judgment to fine-tune each Helios setting for your playing style and guitar. Thanks for watching. Helios, adios.